The morning sky above the city glowed a pale, cloud-washed blue, the kind that looked peaceful but hid the storm waiting inside a man's chest. Jonah Morell, a single dad with a face shaped by responsibility far more than time, gripped the steering wheel of his old sedan with trembling hands. He had practiced confidence in the mirror, holding his chin high, adjusting his tie, rehearsing how he would introduce himself during his first official week as the personal operations coordinator for the youngest CEO in the tech district. But confidence cracked when real life hit, when rent was overdue, when his 9-year-old daughter Hazel asked if they could have fruit with breakfast, and he'd lied, saying he wasn't hungry so she could take the last apple. He had told himself that today needed to go right. It had to, because some people worked for financial goals, but others lived with the fear that one mistake could send everything crumbling. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and emotional stories like this, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Spark right now. Your support helps keep these heart-touching stories coming. Jonah parked in the visitor lot of Aurotech Solutions and stepped out into the bright daytime air, adjusting Hazel's backpack straps before walking her toward the childcare wing attached to the main building. A rare perk, and one of the reasons he had fought so hard for this job. Hazel was small for her age, with curls that glowed chestnut in sunlight and a smile that didn't appear as often as it should. She clutched his hand tightly, and Jonah squeezed back, pretending a steadiness he didn't feel. He knew she sensed his tension. Children always sensed things adults tried to hide. After dropping her off and promising he'd pick her early, Jonah entered the marble-lined lobby, which seemed too grand for someone like him. The world inside Aurotech moved fast, heels clicking across polished floors, screens flashing with data analytics, employees carrying tablets with purpose. And at the center of all this, somewhere on the top floor, was Leora Halden, the 34-year-old CEO who had taken the company from mild relevance to national prominence in 2 years. Rumor said she was sharp, private, intimidating, and unexpectedly compassionate. No one really knew which version was true. Jonah hoped it was the compassionate one. He needed a boss who wasn't looking for reasons to fire him. Jonah arrived at her office earlier than required, anxious and determined. He checked the neatly arranged schedule on his tablet, rehearsed procedures, and practiced maintaining emotional composure. He didn't want pity, didn't want special treatment. He wanted to earn his place, to prove he was more than a man patching holes in a life that had been sinking for years. The door behind him opened softly. He turned and froze. Leora Halden entered not like a commanding storm, but like a quiet piece of sunlight. She wore a crisp ivory suit that contrasted with her warm brown skin, her hair pulled into a sleek daytime bun. There was a kind of natural authority in her posture, but her gaze held something gentler, something observant, as if she didn't just look at people but into them. Jonah straightened immediately, almost too quickly, and she noticed. A flicker of a smile crossed her lips, not mocking but knowing. She reviewed him for only a moment before walking past and placing her tablet on the desk. Jonah cleared his throat and presented her schedule for the day, standing stiff as if awaiting inspection. She finally turned to him fully, tilting her head with an unreadable expression. Then she nodded slowly, a subtle acknowledgement that eased something in his chest. He had prepared for an interrogation, yet her brief smile felt like a stamp of approval he wasn't expecting. From that moment, the first day blurred into the second, and the second into the fifth. Jonah followed Leora through meetings, managed her communications, prepared documents, and ensured her calendar flowed with precision. She was demanding but fair, brilliant yet grounded. And she noticed things, like the way Jonah always checked his phone at exactly 12:15 to confirm Hazel had eaten lunch, or how he packed his daughter an extra snack every day just in case. He tried to hide his personal life, believing professionalism required it, but Leora wasn't blind to the weight he carried. One afternoon, during a daylight strategy session overlooking the city, Jonah felt his phone buzz. He almost silenced it, but the screen displayed Hazel's childcare center. Panic surged. He excused himself immediately, stepping into the hallway. Hazel had tripped during recess, injuring her wrist. The staff insisted it was minor, but recommended pickup. Jonah's chest tightened with guilt. He shouldn't have left her there. He shouldn't have trusted the world with her. He rushed back into the boardroom, apologizing for the interruption and preparing to request early leave. He expected frustration, or dismissal, or reprimand. But Leora, sitting among executives twice her age, simply studied his trembling hands and quietly told him to go. No hesitation, no irritation, just a calm, steady look that saw more than he'd intended to reveal. When Jonah returned the next morning, expecting to be treated differently, or worse, treated gently, Leora surprised him. She carried on normally, almost deliberately maintaining the flow of work so Jonah didn't feel exposed. But there was a shift in her tone when she asked if Hazel was doing better, a softness that disrupted his emotional defenses. As the week went on, the air changed between them, not unprofessional, not inappropriate, but human. Jonah tried harder to stay composed, to keep boundaries rigid, but Leora's empathy chipped away at walls he had reinforced for years. She offered him extra data tracking tools to reduce workload. She casually ordered lunch for him on days he forgot to eat. She once draped a light office blanket over him when he stayed late finishing quarterly projections and dozed off in the conference room. He awoke and removed it quickly, embarrassed, not realizing she had been standing nearby the moment he stirred. The turning point came on a weekday morning after a night of heavy rain. The air was crisp, daylight reflecting on wet pavement outside the office's tall windows. Jonah arrived exhausted after Hazel had woken from nightmares, and he'd spent hours calming her. He didn't complain, he never did. But his fatigue was written in the slump of his shoulders and the faint tremble in his hands. Leora noticed immediately. Midway through preparing her for a leadership briefing, Jonah bent slightly to pick up a stack of files, but the weight almost slipped from his grip. Before he could recover, Leora placed a hand on the documents and helped him steady them. For a brief moment, their eyes met, the tired father who held an entire world on fragile balance, and the CEO who carried responsibilities of thousands, yet saw the quiet suffering of one man. That afternoon, during a long coding presentation, in a room chilled by overworked air conditioning, Jonah wrapped a corporate-issued blanket around himself to keep warm. He stood in the back, taking notes as Leora chaired the meeting from the front. The session stretched for hours, and by the final segment, the temperature had dropped even further. Leora, sitting under a direct vent, visibly shivered though she tried to remain unfazed. Then something unimaginable happened. Not inappropriate, not romantic, but shockingly vulnerable. During a break, Leora stepped toward Jonah, keeping her voice low so no one else could hear. Her breath left her in fog-like wisps due to the cold air. She leaned slightly closer, not invading space but seeking refuge, and her voice emerged soft, almost apologetic. She asked if she could slip under the blanket for a moment, not out of intimacy but need, because the cold had become unbearable, and she had forgotten her jacket during a rushed morning. Jonah stiffened at the unexpected request. His mind raced, professionalism battling instinct, but then he saw the faint tremble in her fingers, the suppressed discomfort she tried to hide to maintain composure in front of her team. Her request wasn't whimsical. It was a rare admission of human need from a woman who carried the world on her shoulders. So, with the gentleness of someone who knew too well what it meant to endure in silence, Jonah lifted the edge of the blanket. Leora stood close beside him, sharing warmth while maintaining a careful, respectable distance.